We live in interesting times.
For the headlines.
Thousands of supporters of populist Iraqi cleric Muqtada Sadr gathered in Baghdad for a rally to demand the ouster of U.S. troops, putting the protest-hit capital on edge.
And Chinese authorities rapidly expanded a mammoth quarantine effort aimed at containing a deadly contagion on Friday to 13 cities and a staggering 41 million people, as nervous residents were checked for fevers and the death toll climbed to 26.
And lead House impeachment manager Adam Schiff called dramatically for the Senate to remove President Donald Trump from office, saying the U.S. leader cannot be trusted to put the country's interests ahead of his own.
And the Iglesia Ni Cristo conducts Aid to Humanity event in Blue Mountain, Ontario, Canada.
I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us.
We welcome our viewers here in the Philippines and around the world. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Cepeda.
And now to the news. First, Chinese authorities rapidly expanded a mammoth quarantine effort aimed at containing the deadly contagion on Friday to 13 cities and a staggering 41 million people, as nervous residents were checked for fevers and the death toll climbed to 26. While the World Health Organization, or WHO, held off on declaring a global emergency despite confirmed cases in half a dozen other countries, China expanded its lockdown to cover an area with a total population greater than Canada's. A range of Lunar New Year festivities have been cancelled, while temporary closures of Beijing's Forbidden City, Shanghai's Disneyland, and a section of the Great Wall were announced to prevent the disease from spreading further. The previously unknown virus has caused alarm because of its similarity to SARS, the severe acute respiratory syndrome, which killed hundreds across mainland China and Hong Kong in 2002 to 2003. The WHO said China faced a national emergency but stopped short of making a declaration that would have prompted greater global cooperation, including possible trade and travel restrictions.
Make no mistake, this is, though, an emergency in China. But it has not yet become a global health emergency. It may yet become one. We know that there is human-to-human transmission in China, but for now it appears limited to family groups and health workers caring for infected patients. At this time, there is no evidence of human-to-human transmission outside China. China has taken measures it believes appropriate to contain the spread of coronavirus in Wuhan and other cities. We hope that they will be both effective and short in their duration. For the moment, WHO does not recommend any broader restrictions on travel or trade. We recommend exit screening at airports as part of a comprehensive set of containment measures. All countries should have in place measures to detect cases of coronavirus, including at health facilities.
With hundreds of millions of people on the move across China for the holiday, the government has halted all travel out of Wuhan, shut down its public transport, and told residents to stay home. Deepening the isolation, there were few flights available to the city. China is rushing to build a new hospital, too, in a staggering 10 days to treat patients at the epicenter of the deadly virus outbreak. The facility in the central city of Wuhan is expected to be in use by February 3 to serve a rising number of patients infected by a coronavirus that has left at least 26 people dead and millions on lockdown in an effort to spread the curb, or to curb the spread, rather. Chinese authorities said the number of cases leaped overnight to more than 800, with 177 in serious condition. There were another 1,072 suspected cases. Officials also said that a virus patient died in Heilongjiang province in China's far northeast, the second death outside the Wuhan epicenter.
Japan's health ministry said it had confirmed the country's second case of a novel coronavirus strain in a man who traveled from the Chinese city of Wuhan. In a statement, the ministry said the man in his 40s was a resident of the Chinese city where the outbreak began and arrived in Japan on January 19. He reported having a fever for several days before his arrival, but said that his condition had stabilized by the time of his arrival in Japan. On January 22, he reported a fever and he is now in a Tokyo hospital receiving treatment, the ministry said. The statement added that the man denied having visited the market in Wuhan, identified as the source of the outbreak, and said he had worn a medical mask while traveling. Passengers who made it out of epidemic hit Wuhan just before quarantine measures effectively sealed off the Chinese city of 11 million, spoke of shuttered stores and empty streets.
やっぱり人がやっぱり全然いない状況で、やはりね、今地下鉄とかバスとか全部ストップしていると伺ってます。日本人駐在員の方含めて、あれですよね、今日学びは飛びましたけど、明日はもう飛ばないって聞いてるので、じゃあどういうふうに帰ればいいのかとか、だから皆さん滞在するままですよね、多分ね。
最終回の試験に滞在してないんで出歩いてませんから、ちょっとそういう話があったんで、なるべくあんまり外には出歩くなっていうそういう話もありましたんで、みんなやっぱりマスク着用っていうのをもう義務付けられてるようになりましたし、あとはもうね、手洗いとかあと消毒とかも全部段取りしていただいてますんで、職場でも、その辺はちょっと皆さん気を使ってますよ。
The World Health Organization on Thursday called for urgent measures against the outbreak, but Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus told a news conference after a two-day meeting in Geneva that it has not become a global health emergency.
Now, as of Friday, more than 800 people have been infected across China, with 177 in serious condition. Authorities were also examining 1,072 suspected cases. Officials also confirmed the second virus death outside the Wuhan region, saying a patient died in Heilongjiang province, 2,000 kilometers to the northeast. The city of Macau has confirmed 2 cases. The first was a 52-year-old businesswoman from Wuhan who arrived in Macau by high-speed rail on Sunday via the neighboring city of Zhuhai. As of Thursday, 2 people have tested positive in Hong Kong, and both had visited Wuhan in recent days and are being treated in isolation wards in hospital. Japan's health authorities confirmed a second case on Friday, according to Kyodo News Agency, saying the patient was a man in his 40s who was originally from Wuhan and on a trip to Japan. On January 16, Japan's health ministry said they had its first case, a man who had visited Wuhan and was hospitalized on January 10, 4 days after his return to Japan. Singapore on Friday announced 2 more confirmed cases of the new SARS-like virus, bringing the total number to 3. The health ministry confirmed the first case on Thursday, a 66-year-old man who arrived from Wuhan with his 37-year-old son, who also tested positive for the coronavirus, and both had arrived in Singapore on Monday. The third confirmed case is a 52-year-old Wuhan woman who arrived in the city-state on Tuesday and was admitted to hospital the following day. South Korea also confirmed on Friday its second case of the virus. The health ministry said a South Korean man in his 50s started experiencing symptoms while working in Wuhan on January 10. He was tested his return earlier this week and the virus was confirmed. On January 22, meanwhile, authorities confirmed the first case on the self-ruled island of Taiwan. A Taiwanese woman in her 50s living in Wuhan who returned to the island on Monday with symptoms including fever, coughing, and a sore throat. Thailand also has detected 4 cases so far. 3 Chinese nationals from Wuhan and a 73-year-old Thai woman who came back from the Chinese city this month. On January 21, the United States announced its first case, a man in his 30s living near Seattle. Officials say he is in a good condition and approached authorities himself after reading about the virus in news reports. Vietnam confirmed 2 cases of the virus on Thursday. An infected man from Wuhan traveled to Ho Chi Minh City earlier this month and passed the virus on to his son. And both are being treated in the hospital and are stable, according to Vietnamese health officials.
Flights to Moscow from the Chinese city of Wuhan have been suspended over fears about the spread of a previously unknown coronavirus strain. Interfax news agency cited an unnamed source as saying on Friday. According to the Moscow Times, prior to the suspension, Russian airports step up screenings of travelers from China after hundreds of people were infected in an outbreak of the virus with 26 reported deaths. Russia's deputy health minister called the disease a biological threat to the country earlier this week. Russia has already had a coronavirus scare as 2 patients were hospitalized Wednesday in St. Petersburg with symptoms of the coronavirus. The 2 men had sparked a medical scare after arriving at St. Petersburg Pulkovo Airport on a flight from Shanghai with symptoms of the deadly virus. They were sent to St. Petersburg's Botkin Hospital for infectious diseases for medical tests after showing signs of a viral respiratory infection, but were not found to be carrying the disease.
In other news, police say they have found human remains at a burnt-out house near Moruya a day after devastating fires once again tore through the New South Wales South Coast in Australia. The body, believed to be of a man but not yet identified, was found by police officers on Friday, taking the death toll from the Australian bushfire crisis to 33. It comes a day after 3 American firefighters identified as Captain Ian Macbeth, First Officer Paul Clyde Hudson, and Flight Engineer Rick Dermigan Jr. were killed when their C-130 water-bombing aircraft crashed in the snowy Monaro region. Days after New South Wales and the Australian Capital Territory was blanketed in heavy rain and hail, dangerous fire conditions returned to New South Wales on Thursday with hot, dry temperatures and a subsequent cool change, pushing a 240,000-hectare blaze through the south coast towns of Moruya and Bermagui. The New South Wales Rural Fire Service has said it was aware of property losses, but the damage has yet to be quantified. More than 2,000 homes have been lost across Australia since the fire crisis began. Meanwhile, the federal government services minister Stuart Roberts said the government has now paid out $68 million under the Australian government disaster recovery payment and disaster recovery allowance. Mr. Roberts said 57,000 claims had been processed since September and more than $10.9 million in additional payments had been paid to eligible families affected by the bushfires. More than 27,000 extra payments for affected families with children, which the government has increased from $400 to $800, have now been issued.
In Taal, its bulletin at 8 a.m. says activity in the main crater in the past 24 hours has been characterized by weak to moderate emission of white steam-laden plumes to 50 to 500 meters high from the main crater. Sulfur dioxide emission was measured at an average of 224 tons a day. There have been fresh reports of ashfall in some areas in Metro Manila after Taal's newest steam-driven eruption. For the past 24 hours, the Taal Volcano Network, which can record small earthquakes undetectable by the PSN, recorded 486 volcanic earthquakes, including 4 low-frequency earthquakes. Such intense activity likely signifies continuous magmatic intrusion beneath the Taal edifice, which may lead to further eruptive activity. Alert Level 4 was still raised over Taal, and authorities advised the public to keep out of the 14-kilometer danger zone. Meanwhile, the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council said on Friday that the number of families displaced by the restive Taal volcano has climbed to 88,842 in its 6 a.m. update. The agency said this figure is equivalent to 346,244 persons. Affected families are from Batangas, Cavite, Laguna, and Quezon.
The death toll from a violent storm which has wrought havoc on huge swaths of Spain's eastern and southern coastline rose to, here's an update now, 13, as rescuers searched for 4 missing people. The latest deaths were in the northern Catalonia region, where the emergency services found the body of a man inside a vehicle in Cabaches, 60 kilometers northwest of the port city of Tarragona. They had earlier found another man's body in a flooded river near Horba, 70 kilometers northwest of Barcelona. And on late Wednesday, they found a man who died after falling into the water in Palamos, a port town about 100 kilometers up the coast from Barcelona. They are also searching for another man missing from a merchant ship in the same area. Earlier on Thursday, regional officials confirmed the death of a 75-year-old woman whose house collapsed because of heavy rain in Alcoy, a town in the eastern Alicante region. Storm Gloria hit the region on Sunday, bringing strong winds, torrential rains, and heavy snow battering Spain's southern and eastern flanks before moving north.
United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, or FAO, warned that Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia are dealing with desert locust swarms of unprecedented size and destructive potential that could spill over into more countries in East Africa. Here's more.
The desert locust invasion, what we know is that it's the worst that we've seen in Ethiopia, in Somalia in 25 years, and the worst that we've seen in Kenya in over 70 years. The extent of the locust situation varies from country to country, but in the Horn of Africa, it is current in Ethiopia, Kenya, and in Somalia. We know that in Ethiopia, there's about 430 square kilometers that have been affected so far, and there has been extensive crop damage in those areas. As it moves to other parts of the country, we expect that the impact that it will have on food security and agricultural livelihoods, both for the farmers and for the pastoralists, can be significant. There is a risk for it spreading. The countries that are on watch, the most significant countries on watch at this point, are Uganda and South Sudan. Uganda has not had to deal with a locust infestation since the 60s, so there is concern about the ability for experts on the ground to be able to deal with it without the external support. And in a country like South Sudan, already there are 47% of the population is food insecure. We are looking at monitoring, looking at the current assessment of the impact so far, monitoring the situation, providing support for control measures, both aerial and ground, as well as ensuring that the monitoring and the surveillance is continuing. But that is not enough. We also have to have anticipatory approaches to safeguard the livelihoods of the farmers and the agriculturalists.
The world is losing the war against climate change. That is according to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. And he told this to the business leaders at the Davos Forum. He urged rapid action to prevent humanity from being doomed. Let's listen in.
It is absolutely essential to recognize that climate change is an existential threat to us all, and that climate change is running faster than what we are. We are not winning this war, and we absolutely must do it. Climate change is indeed, for me, the defining issue of our time. For the first time in the history of humankind, there is a limit, a physical limit, to our perspectives of development. And this has led humankind to declare a war to nature, and nature is striking back in a very violent way, as we have seen in different parts of the world. I know that for some people there is this idea, well, climate change is probably something to take into account in the future, and the planet is very resilient, and the planet will not be destroyed. I fully agree. The planet will not be destroyed. In the next few centuries and millennia, we will see the planet around the sun. What will be destroyed is our capacity to live in this planet. We will be destroyed by climate change, not the planet.
He further said there is an urgent need to move towards green economy, and the subsidies being paid with taxpayers' money should not go to fossil fuels. He also expressed concern that domestic political complications of many countries have not allowed them to do what was committed in the Paris Accord. He said G20 accounts for 80% of global emissions, and they are big emitters. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Makapagsulat ng sarili mong kwento? Pangarap mo ba na maging direktor ng isang pelikula? O pangarap mo na maging isang artista? Let's make it real! Sali na sa aming workshops. Scriptwriting, directing, and acting. Ipakita ang talento sa gagawing guerrilla filmmaking at magkaroon ng pagkakataong manalo sa ating awards night. Kasama ang internationally acclaimed director, Direk Carlo Ortega Cuevas. EBC Films, make it real! Malapit na!
Lead House impeachment manager Adam Schiff called dramatically for the Senate to remove President Donald Trump from office Thursday, saying the U.S. leader cannot be trusted to put the country's interests ahead of his own. Watch this.
You can't trust this president to do what's right for this country. You can trust he will do what's right for Donald Trump. He'll do it now. He's done it before. He'll do it for the next several months. He'll do it in the election if he's allowed to. This is why, if you find him guilty, you must find that he should be removed.
The president's conduct is wrong. It is illegal. It is dangerous. And it captures the worst fears of our founders and the framers of the Constitution. Since President George Washington took office in 1789, no president has abused his power in this way.
But perhaps above all else, it's about liberty. Because in America, for all of us, what keeps us free from tyranny is the sacred principle that in this great country, no one is above the law.
Over 9 hours, the Democrats methodically dismantled Republican claims that Trump did nothing wrong. They left few doubts that Trump's sole motivation in secretly freezing aid to Ukraine last July was to force Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky to announce one investigation into Biden and a second into an unsupported story that Kiev helped Democrats in the 2016 elections. Democratic prosecutors will complete their arguments Friday with a focus on the second impeachment charge, obstruction of Congress, before Trump's legal team holds the floor in his defense for 3 days.
Meanwhile, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer criticized the Senate Republicans for voting on party lines to block Democrat efforts to subpoena government documents and records. President Trump stands accused of withholding military aid from Ukraine to pressure his Ukrainian counterpart to announce an investigation into Democrat and potential election rival Joe Biden. Republicans who hold a 53-47 edge have shown little inclination, however, to break ranks with a president who has a history of lashing out ferociously at his perceived enemies. 67 senators, a two-thirds majority, are needed to remove President Trump from office, and a series of votes Tuesday on the trial's ground rules followed strict party lines. Republicans defeated repeated efforts by Democrats to introduce White House witnesses and documents at the start of the trial. President Trump called the proceedings a hoax and said he expected the Senate to clear him fairly quickly. Let's listen in.
But House managers are setting the bar very high. Tuesday was a discussion over amendment votes. But yesterday, the managers got to lay out their case uninterrupted. As manager after manager stepped up to lay out the evidence amassed against the president in precise and devastating detail, the atmosphere of the Senate took on an entirely different dimension. It may have been the first time that many of my Republican colleagues heard the full story, the complete narrative from start to finish, uninterrupted and not filtered through the kaleidoscope lens of Fox News, where at best things are left out and at worst things are terribly distorted. But House managers are setting the bar very high for the President's Council to meet. At this point, I'm not sure how the President's Council, as unprepared, confused, and tending towards conspiracy theories as they have been, can clear it.
Thousands of supporters of volatile Iraqi cleric Muqtada Sadr gathered in Baghdad on Friday for a million-strong march to demand the ouster of U.S. troops, putting the protest-hit capital on edge. The march has rattled the separate, months-old protest movement that has gripped the capital and the Shiite majority south since October, demanding a government overhaul, early elections, and more accountability. In the early hours of Friday, thousands of men, women, and children of all ages massed under gray skies in the Jadiriya district of East Baghdad. The American military presence has been a hot-button issue in Iraq since a U.S. drone strike killed Iranian General Qasem Soleimani and Iraqi paramilitary leader Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis outside Baghdad airport on January 3. 2 days later, Parliament voted for all foreign troops, including some 5,200 U.S. personnel, to leave the country. The vote was non-binding, and a senior U.S. official said that Washington had yet to open talks with Baghdad on a troop pullout. Several pro-Iran factions from the hashed al-Sha'aba paramilitary, or from the Hashed al-Sha'abi paramilitary force, usually rivals of Iraqi cleric Muqtada Sadr, have backed his call and pledged to join. Preparations were in full swing as early as noon on Thursday, with additional checkpoints across Baghdad to secure the protest area and buses ferrying in people for the rally.
In other news, world leaders and Holocaust survivors marked 75 years since the liberation of Auschwitz, the World War II death camp where the Nazis killed more than 1.1 million people, most of them Jews. The presidents of Russia and France, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence, and Britain's Prince Charles, representing the wartime Allied powers, addressed the somber ceremony at the Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial Center in Jerusalem. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu urged action against the tyrants of Tehran during his speech. In a similar view, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence urged the international community to stand strong against Iran. Russian President Vladimir Putin called for a summit in 2020 with the leaders of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council to defend peace in the face of global instability. Here's more.
I'm concerned that we have yet to see a unified and resolute stance against the most anti-Semitic regime on the planet, a regime that openly seeks to develop nuclear weapons and annihilate the one and only Jewish state. Israel salutes President Trump and Vice President Pence for confronting the tyrants of Tehran that subjugate their own people. The tyrants of Tehran that subjugate their own people and threaten the peace and security of the entire world. They threaten the peace and security of everyone in the Middle East and everyone beyond. I call on all governments to join the vital effort of confronting Iran.
We must also stand strong against the leading state purveyor of anti-Semitism, against the one government in the world that denies the Holocaust as a matter of state policy and threatens to wipe Israel off the map. The world must stand strong against the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Пример, на мой взгляд, могут и должны подать страны-основательницы Организации Объединенных Наций. 5 держав, которые несут особую ответственность за сохранение цивилизации. Мы обсуждали с некоторыми коллегами и, насколько я понимаю, в целом увидели положительную реакцию. Провести встречу глав государств, постоянных членов Совета Безопасности ООН, России, Китая, США, Франции и Великобритании. В любой стране, в любой точке мира, где это будет удобно коллегам. Проведение такой встречи именно в этом 2020 году считаю важным и символичным. Ведь мы отмечаем 75 лет окончания Второй мировой войны и основания Организации Объединенных Наций. Саммит государств, которые внесли главный вклад в разгром агрессора, в создание системы послевоенного мироустройства, сыграл бы огромную роль в поиске коллективных ответов на современные вызовы и угрозы.
The lessons of the Holocaust are searingly relevant to this day. 75 years after the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau, hatred and intolerance still lurk in the human heart, still tell new lies, adopt new disguises, and still seek new victims. We must be vigilant in discerning these ever-changing threats. We must be fearless in confronting falsehoods and resolute in resisting words and acts of violence. We must never rest in seeking to create mutual understanding and respect. The Holocaust was an appalling Jewish tragedy, but it was also a universal human tragedy, and one which we compound if we do not heed its lessons.
Haunting pictures of Auschwitz have been released to mark the 75th anniversary of the Nazi death camp's liberation. Images made available by the Auschwitz Memorial and Museum show the unloading ramp and gate of death at the camp in occupied Poland, as well as emaciated prisoners and piles of clothes. The Nazis' largest death camp was liberated by the Soviet Red Army on January 27, 1945, and the day is commemorated as International Holocaust Remembrance Day worldwide. Auschwitz has two sites, Auschwitz I in abandoned Polish military base and bigger Auschwitz II or Birkenau. It is estimated that 1.3 million people were sent to Auschwitz and 1.1 million died there, including 960,000 Jews, 74,000 non-Jewish Poles, 21,000 Roma people, 15,000 Soviet prisoners of war, and up to 15,000 other Europeans. Prisoners who were not gassed in chambers died of starvation, exhaustion, disease, individual executions, beatings, or were killed during medical experiments.
On a lighter note, the Iglesia ni Cristo, through its Felix Y. Manalo Foundation, is non-stop in giving aid to humanity all over the world. Another event was held in Blue Mountain, Ontario. Here's Ashley Sakmar for the report.
Snow is definitely in season here in Beaver Valley Community Center in Blue Mountain, Ontario, Canada. But you know what's always in season for the FYM Foundation and the members of the Church of Christ? Helping others and helping their fellow men in need. From all over the Greater Toronto Area, members of this church, through the Felix Y. Manalo Foundation, made the 2-hour trek up north to show their support for this project, as well as their time and effort to reach out to those in this community.
So what's going on today is an event that's held by the Iglesia ni Cristo, and it's similar to an outreach program. It's similar to helping the needy in this part of the world, and it's pretty fun. Everybody's been eating food. We've been giving out goodie bags to all of our guests who we invited to this part of the Ontario.
Each bag contained the basic essentials, food, along with some winter clothing, and they were all given out to those in attendance. Those in attendance were asked about their reaction, their purpose, and their thoughts about the importance of helping others.
I believe that helping those in need is very important because, you know, some people are down their luck and everybody needs a little help here and there. And who knows, like if they get the help that they need, it could motivate them to become better and better versions of themselves. So that's why I think helping people is very important.
It's a major goal of humanity, right? It's very noble and it's very honoring to be a part of this.
Helping others is and should always be in season, for there are always people who are in need. From Blue Mountain, Ontario, Canada, Ashley Sakmar, Eagle News, 1/25.
Thank you, Ashley. More news will be coming your way when Eagle News International returns.
I am here at Gastown, which is a National Historic Site in Vancouver, British Columbia. Located in Vancouver's oldest neighborhood is the steam-powered clock, which is Gastown's most famous landmark. Make sure to tune in to Digital Nest every Tuesday and Thursday at 7:30 p.m. I am Lou Aquino, EBC correspondent, and I am 1/25.
Welcome back. Brazil's two top officials, the presidents of the European Commission and the European Council, signed off on Britain's EU divorce agreement on Friday. Take a look. With Ursula von der Leyen and Charles Michel's formal endorsement, the text will now go to the European Parliament on Wednesday, January 29, for ratification. On Thursday, diplomats from the EU member states will approve the deal in writing, and then on Friday, January 31, Britain spends its last day in the EU before leaving the bloc. at 2300 GMT as clocks strike midnight in Brussels. Then on Thursday, diplomats from the EU member states will approve the deal in writing, ensuring Britain's orderly departure at 2300 GMT Friday as clock ticks into Saturday in Brussels. Official photographs of the official signing ceremony conducted before dawn in the European Council's headquarters in Brussels showed Chief EU Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier looking on. British voters backed leaving the European Union in a June 2016 referendum, and after lengthy negotiations and several delays, Prime Minister Boris Johnson's new government plans to get Brexit done next week.
ECB Chief Christine Lagarde on Thursday said the bank should study or would study what role it could play in combating climate change as part of a major policy review, warning of the danger of doing nothing.
While we might not be ahead of the curve yet, we are not sitting on our bottom doing nothing. Climate change is actually a threat to financial stability. And what's more is that it's a threat and a risk that is hardly measured and taken into account by many actors.
Unlike her predecessor, Mario Draghi, Lagarde has placed a strong emphasis on climate protection since taking the helm of the European Central Bank in November. The question of what the bank can do to play its part in the fight will be a key plank of the ECB's newly launched strategic review, the first rethink of its tools and goals since 2003. She said she was aware of critical voices who worried that climate protection would be a distraction from the ECB's mandate to ensure price stability, or who believed that climate policies should be left out of central banking altogether.
And European Central Bank Chief Christine Lagarde also said that risks to the Eurozone economy had become less pronounced. This is in the wake of a U.S.-China trade truce, even as President Donald Trump reignited a trade spat with Europe. Speaking to reporters after chairing her second meeting as president, Lagarde said the bank's ultra-easy money policies remained necessary in the face of a stubbornly low inflation and slow growth. But she hinted that the ECB was more optimistic about the euro area outlook following the partial U.S.-China trade deal struck after 2 years of tensions that roiled the global economy. Let's listen in.
The risks surrounding the euro area growth outlook related to geopolitical factors, rising protectionism, and vulnerabilities in emerging markets remain tilted to the downside, but have become less pronounced as some of the uncertainty surrounding international trade is receding.
Serena Williams was sensationally knocked out of the Australian Open third round by China's Wang Qiang on Friday, torpedoing her bid for a record equaling 24th Grand Slam crown. Williams, 38, was the bookies' favorite to win an A title at Melbourne Park, but she came unstuck against a determined Wang, who took only one game off the American last time they met. The 6-4, 6-7, 2-7, 7-5 upset means Williams, whose last major win was at the 2017 Australian Open when she was pregnant, has fallen short at 8 Grand Slams since returning from having a baby in 2018. Her reward is a clash with Tunisia's Ons Jabeur, who upset Williams' close friend Caroline Wozniacki, sending the Dane into retirement. Williams, seeded 8, started slowly against the fast, positive Wang, and she was 3 break points down in the 9th game when Wang punched away a forehand to grab the break. Serving for the set, Wang won a full-blooded rally to bring up set point and then sealed it to go one set up, a far cry from their last meeting in New York.
In other sports news, Tokyo 2020 organizers have run a series of disaster drills ahead of this summer's showpiece event. Japan lies on the Pacific Ring of Fire, a zone of seismic activity where earthquakes are common. Take a look.
今回、観客等がエキストラではあるんですが、障害者の方も参加していただいたところで、アンケートを行いまして、いろいろなその要望とか意見がございますので、そちらの方をですね、検証して、それぞれ見直しを図っていきたいというふうに考えております。英語がわからない、外国の方もいらっしゃいますから、そういったところはですね、これからもその多言語に対応できるような何か体制というのは、取る必要があるというふうに考えております。
Without warning, a 7.3 magnitude earthquake rips through Tokyo Bay, shaking the ground violently and causing widespread damage, panic, and multiple casualties throughout the city. Fortunately, this was just the hypothetical scenario behind this disaster drill held just before December 25 to help the Tokyo 2020 organizers prepare for the worst while hoping they will never have to respond for real. The drill, covering 2 locations and involving over 500 volunteers, was part of Tokyo's contingency planning as one of the world's most seismically active countries gears up to host this summer games. While visitors from around the world may be unnerved by earthquakes, officials stress there is no country better prepared or equipped. Japan experiences thousands of tremors per year of varying sizes, and the vast majority cause little or no damage, with emergency services well drilled.
People flocked to Toronto for this year's Fan Expo Canada event, a pop culture event dedicated to comics, the Toronto Comic Book Show. Here is Patricia Kadai for the report.
Avengers, Star Wars, X-Men, Batman, you name it. All the big blockbuster superhero films all have one thing in common. Their stories began on the pages of a comic book. Today, fans and readers all over Toronto are here to support and celebrate comic books.
Before the big screen, fans read these stories by holding a comic book in their hands, eagerly waiting for the next edition.
Just childhood memories, childhood dream, just, looking around and seeing what I can remember from when I was a kid. It's big business now in the movies.
The Toronto Comic Book Show keeps the culture alive by featuring the best in modern, Silver Age, Golden Age comics, trade paperbacks, and graphic novels. The show also features popular and beloved toys, TV show, and movie memorabilia.
Well, comic books are important because they're number one, they're a mix between, and this is going back to the past when comic books weren't as respected. If you had a good book, it was an amazing book, bestseller. If you had great art, that you were a master, this is a masterpiece, you're a great artist. But these comic artists that were so good and wrote great stories, you put the writing with the art and it was maligned. But now what's happened is it's become more mainstream, and so now putting writing with the art, and a lot of these guys are like rock stars now, and as evidence, it's influenced Hollywood and movies. It's become so mainstream. Comic books are actually an incredible part, more than I ever would have thought of the culture. It's like people have rings of superhero ringtones. They have, it's not just a kid having a lunch pail anymore, you know what I mean? It's these movies are making hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's secondary characters. It doesn't have to be Spider-Man, Superman, or Batman. It can be like evidence Guardians of the Galaxy, which I thought wouldn't work, and it ended up being a blockbuster, right? And then the follow-up. So now it's like a real big part of pop culture. So now it's all mainstream. It's go into a Walmart, walk down the street, you'll see comic book stuff. Comic related influences everywhere now, where you never used to see that as much.
Comic books, like other forms of literature, continue to impact its avid readers. From Toronto, Canada, this is Patricia Kadai for Eagle News.
Thank you, Patricia Kaday from our EBC Toronto Bureau.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Tumblr. Also, check out our boards on Pinterest and pictures on Instagram. I'm Sam Cepeda. Thanks for joining us.
And that's the news for tonight. Join us online and here again tomorrow evening. From all of us here, I'm Alma Angeles, and we're one with 25.